Hi, everybody. Reading from my book, Transforming Suffering into Wisdom. Last time we read from a chapter called Causes of Suffering and what we talked, or cycles of suffering, cycles of suffering. And what we talked about was how the structure of suffering being the same, the jumble of uncomfortable feelings that get hooked to our thoughts and stories by the linchpin of I, me, and mine, that what happens often when we suffer is we attempt to end that suffering by changing our beliefs, changing our belief systems. And that works for a while. But without learning to tame in some way the feelings, what happens is we simply recycle that habit of suffering. What we're interested in this book is ending that habit of suffering. And this next chapter goes deeper with that process. I think gives you more detail and analysis to it. And this chapter is called Cause of Suffering, More Cycles of Suffering. So we'll go into more detail about how those cycles of suffering work. Another way that suffering keeps cycling through our lives is also driven by habit. It goes like this. We experience a sensation from one of our 6 senses. I'm including thinking as the 6th sense, each thought a mere sensation. We have a feeling of liking, not liking, or neutrality in relation to the sensation. Simply by returning to the feeling and its thoughts, we foster the process of identification and attachment. We turn liking into craving, not liking into aversion, and neutrality into boredom. We go further. We begin to cling to the craving and its object, the aversion and its object, or the boredom and its object, with self-thoughts, creating structures of suffering. The end result of clinging is always suffering. We fall into darkness. We blank out. The next thing we are aware of is another sensation to which we respond with a feeling of liking, not liking, or neutrality. Not knowing any other way, we pursue this sensation as well into craving and clinging, and suffering. And so the world turns. We respond to sensations out of habit, but it is the sensations that give us our one opportunity for freedom from this cycle of suffering. If, when we felt a sensation, instead of being pulled by our habitual emotional responses, we simply felt the sensation and, living in the present moment, shifted our awareness to the next sensation, and so on, we would find freedom from suffering instead. So a couple of things I really like from this chapter. Of course, it's really interesting to see how the habit of suffering deepens and has different qualities or textures to it, different ways of arriving in our lives. One of the things I like is if you think about each of these movements toward aversion, toward desire, toward boredom, they each come because of a self-identification. We want to cling to that. We want to grab toward ourselves. We want to crave this pleasant sensation. We want to push away, and as a result, we get sticky with an unpleasant sensation. And in a similar way, we want to get rid of the boredom. We don't like the neutrality. When we identify with it, we get bored. And then and in each of these situations, we kind of blank out. Our life darkens, and it may be a moment later, another sensation arises, but we've kind of forgotten where we were. And it requires us to go through that habit again. I think the other thing that I like about this, looking at this, is the simplicity of just noticing liking, not liking, or neutrality. Even there, if we can notice that and let go at that moment, knowing that the liking will take us into craving and clinging, the not liking will take us into aversion, and the neutrality will take us into boredom. If we can let go of that immediately with our wonderful meditation practice of just being here in the moment with sensations, we can end the habit of suffering just simply by noticing this pattern. It's quite incredible. See you next time.